Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
All right, historians, welcome back. This Week in Wrestling History podcast. We're your hosts, Jacob, Ryan.
You did that backwards. I can't say yo now.
Yes, I've done it that way a ton of times. I normally do it that way.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure.
Whatever.
Anyways.
Shows how much I pay attention.
Yeah, you're the editor. You should be paying attention to it at some point.
Meh.
All right, anyways. Here with our fourth week of horror wrestling gimmicks.
Yeah, I got to think of a funny subtitle for this one.
Figure out whatever they called, like the fourth Nightmare on Elm Street or the fourth Jason movie and just subtitle it that.
I don't remember what I just made the third one.
Well, for those listening, if you see the subtitle on this and it's the name of the fourth Nightmare on Elm Street movie, you'll know where that came from.
So yeah, this is week 4 of our Supernatural Superstars.
Yep, the fourth and final Supernatural Superstars. And we actually have mostly good, hopefully.
We've saved the best 2 for last.
Yeah,
and then
definitely the top 2. And then
one of the worst ones for last.
Oh, is it a worst one? Yeah, it's probably a worst one.
I mean, it's probably only number 2 to the Dungeon of Doom.
Oof. With the Boogeyman on the list. That's saying something.
This is worse than the Boogeyman.
All right, so we're going to sandwich that one into the middle. But we're going to start off with the most recent addition to the list and the thing that kickstarted this whole idea for us being The Fiend, Bray Wyatt. So we're not going to cover the Southern Bayou cult leader Bray Wyatt aspects. It definitely had with the whole Sister Abigail, and definitely more towards the end they started going definitely more supernatural with him, because that character started out kind of creepy but still a little bit more reality based.
Yeah, and he really didn't hit the supernatural stuff as Bray Wyatt until
like that Randy Orton feud.
Yeah, and with Woken Matt Hardy.
Yeah, and going against Finn Balor there.
Yeah.
So we started to see some signs of something being a little bit more with Bray, but they didn't really go with it, and it came off half-assed and bad. So then, cut to earlier 2019. We start seeing puppets backstage. And it looks like it's going to be the dumbest thing in the world. Off the bat, based on just, I think it was the Abby the Witch and Mercy the Buzzard.
Yes. They
showed up backstage for a couple weeks, and when I saw photos of them, I'm like, this is going to be the worst thing in history.
Yeah. And then we got, who was it after that, Ramblin' Rabbit?
I don't think he ever showed up backstage.
Oh, you're talking about like when the wrestlers were walking to the ring and like the puppets would pop out from around the corner kind of thing.
Yeah. Or you'd see like Mercy in a box or something. And it was just, they looked really like lame and they looked half-assed was the problem. It looked really cartoony and just like, what? It just looks like it was poorly made. Why is this a thing? This looks bad. So, cut to a couple weeks later, suddenly this happy, cheery, bright, sunshiny music starts playing, and we have the first ever Firefly Funhouse. And everything changed.
Yeah, when I kind of get what you were saying with the puppets, but as soon as that music hit and Bray Wyatt comes out from behind
he walks into a door like Mr. Rogers
and starts waving and like, "Hi, kids."
He's wearing a sweater and the "Hi, kids." And it's just,
it was one of those like, this is gonna,
something's happening now. Yeah,
this is going to be different.
It was just such a tonal shift in something so different that clearly something was up. And then that one, I don't think it had any Fiend flashes in it.
Well, I think the first one had the hurt heel.
Yes, but it didn't have any it didn't have the Fiend mask anywhere.
Right.
But it just ended with him going suddenly serious and staring into the camera and "let me in."
And it was whenever he would start off happy, cheery and everything, and then he would just do that little head tilt down.
Yeah, just
and then start talking very monotone.
Yeah, it just get a little more soft spoken, and it was just such a clear indicator of this is not what this guy normally does. In that schism there, that tonal shift between bright, bubbly, happy, everything's very colorful to sinister tone.
Yeah,
and then like they definitely also had him. That was the one where he brought out the chainsaw and cut down the standee of the old Bray Wyatt, and it was all. Yes, this is definitely how something overly violent would be presented in very kiddie-friendly ways. So it's like, ooh, this is an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, and especially when we start getting, further in and getting the other additional puppets in.
Right, as we
such as
Huskus and Rambling Rabbit, and Rambling Rabbit becomes the Kenny of the show and gets disemboweled a couple times.
Yeah, and we also end up getting Vince McMahon as a puppet.
Yep,
but with like a single devil horn.
Yeah, so that definitely I think spoke more to the smarter fans, and everyone obviously enjoyed that aspect of it. But then we started getting the flashes of the Fiend showing up during the Firefly Funhouse, where it would be almost like a burning inferno behind him.
Yeah,
but it was definitely a much more horror style. Like, it definitely looked like Joker from I forget what Batman storyline it was. It's probably like 5 or 6 years ago now, if not more. But it was the one where Joker's face was actually a mask for people.
Yeah, it was after Joker supposedly dies.
Yeah,
and Harley cuts his face off and runs around throwing it on different villains.
She starts putting it on other people, trying to make them into the Joker.
Yeah, like the big famous one is that she puts it on Deadshot.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it definitely had that feel to it, but it was a little worse almost.
Yeah, it was, because it combined that aspect of this is someone's face being stretched over something that isn't there, like it's been removed and put back on, but it also had about like the smile is too wide, there's too many teeth,
there's like fangs in it.
Yeah, the eyes are super sunken, and yeah, there is a slight inhuman aspect about it, but in a very human-esque way.
Yeah.
So it looks, when it comes to body horror, I think one of the worst things worst being best in the case of body horror, one of the most unsettling things you can do is take the human anatomy and just push it slightly wrong.
Yeah.
Because, we've all, like, the slasher films stop kind of losing their effect when it's so over the top that someone just explodes into a bajillion pieces and there's like 80 billion gallons of red water everywhere. It's like,
yeah, when
it becomes comical because it's so far removed from reality.
When Jason takes New York or Manhattan or Brooklyn, whatever it is, and he literally punches a guy's head off of his shoulders. It's a little much.
Right. Like, that's never going to happen.
Right.
That's literally never going to happen. However, punching someone and dislocating their jaw and then seeing it like slightly off and unhinged on one side would be awful to see, because it'd be like, oh, that could happen.
Yeah.
The closer to reality it is, the easier it is for your imagination to go, oh, that could be me if X happened.
Right.
So the Fiend definitely rides that line of over the top, but still within the realm of familiar enough to go, oh, that's wrong, and I know it's wrong because of this, and my brain doesn't like it. It almost kind of like makes your brain itch.
Yeah.
Because it's familiar but wrong.
Yep.
And be like, it'd probably be like going back to your childhood home if your parents had moved away and someone else moved in and they rearranged everything and moved like new furniture in and painted the walls. You'd be like, oh, this is the same place, but that's wrong and this is wrong.
This isn't what it's supposed to be.
Right. Like going back like a decade or two later, and it's like everything is off.
Yeah.
It's close, but it's not right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really a great place to mine for like nightmare fuel, because it's so relatable. Like, the best thing you can do to make someone uncomfortable, I think, is to make it where they can put themselves in that position because, as humans, we show empathy for each other, and most of us do, hopefully. And if you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, and it's a really uncomfortable shoes, that makes it affect you more.
Yeah, and that the mask is only part of this whole thing with the Fiend. I mean, when he first debuted and actually showed up and came out to the ring and had the lights go off, which to me seems like it's been well overplayed in wrestling now.
To an extent, yes.
I mean, the fact that Cody used it when he came out to jump Jericho on AEW a couple of weeks ago, it's overplayed. However,
right,
the way that they've been doing it with the Fiend, where they don't just all of a sudden go off, you hear this powering down sound effect.
Yeah,
and you hear, or you see, lights on the left side go off, then lights on the right.
Yeah,
then they all go off.
Yeah, it's done. It almost makes it worse because what it is, it's kind of like the kick before the Stone Cold Stunner.
Right.
It's it's coming.
Yeah.
Oh Lord, he coming.
And the other thing that is very off-putting about it, in a good way, is those lights that come on whenever he's in the ring.
Not the stupid red lights that we'll get to that in a little bit, but yes, those flashing white spotlights that I think they're being handheld by crew, and they're just kind of moving them randomly around.
They are, and they're also turning them on and off as they go.
Right, I assume that was just a strobe function on it, but yeah, those strobing spotlights that are just throwing these really weird contorted shadows all over the ring, and just making it a little bit harder to get a firm grasp on what he actually looks like. And that does add so much to the character because the more known an entity is, the less scary it is. It's that little aspect of every time you think you got your head wrapped around it, there's a new aspect to it that you didn't get that kind of changes the context for everything. And just having flashing strobes light a person makes it real difficult to figure out physically where exactly they are, how big they are.
Right.
It's just a little disorienting. And that adds so much to this guy because we know who Bray Wyatt is. We're very familiar with it. But then it makes this version different. It pulls it away. It makes it so we have a good idea, but we're not 100% sure. And as long as we're not really sure, we're trying to figure it out, and we're interested.
Yeah, and it's not even like it's just Bray Wyatt with different ring gear. It makes him feel completely different than anything that happened to him prior.
Right. There's similar mannerisms and movesets and such, but it definitely does take him to a different mindset. He's definitely operating differently, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, at least it was. Up until Hell in a Cell 2019.
I thought we weren't going to talk about that.
Yeah, we're gonna try to do like the WWE does and trying to ignore this whole thing. I think a lot of the future of the Fiend is going to hang at the next crown jewel here coming up.
Yeah. Which
scares the shit out of me again, but they definitely did damage to the character by they WWE'd it. They brought it into the realm of, for WWE, how do we do scary things? We're going to have all red lights. That's what Kane did. We're going to have him take 8 billion thousand attacks and then stand up later.
And I mean, even that part is fine with it. But they didn't need to do the red lights or anything like that because they didn't have it when he faced Finn.
Right, and that was the thing. That match with Finn was perfect because it wasn't a complete squash, but it was a 95% squash.
Finn got offense in. Finn hit some moves, but then out of nowhere, it was mandible claw.
Yeah, it was right back onto it.
Right.
And it was extremely well done, and boy, was that whole Bray Wyatt head lantern disconcerting too. Like,
Yeah.
It just did such a great job of making the character familiar but different, and it put a brand new spin on it, and it dropped a bunch of the baggage it had and added new interesting twists and it still maintained an aspect of, man, and we still don't even know everything. Like, there's still a lot of unanswered questions.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to the entire premise of, does that make it for a good horror character? Absolutely.
Right. If you think back to the Jason movies, the Michael Myers movies, when it's just a guy who's standing in the background and you would see him randomly.
Right. There's
you don't know exactly why he's there.
Right. Like, when they were still unknown entities, when they were still, what's going on? Who is this guy? Where is he coming from? Before it becomes overexposed and just funny and everyone gets on the side of the killer. Like, that's absolutely not what you want. It's much like the fans cheering the heel in wrestling. You don't want the fans cheering the villain in a horror movie.
Yeah. I.e. Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers. People end up going to those to see the dumb teenagers get killed.
Right.
You have dropped the ball there because your quote-unquote protagonists aren't relatable. Your antagonists are too known. They're too relatable. Like, you flip-flopped things. Your antagonist is relatable. Your protagonist is unrelatable. You've screwed this up.
Yeah.
Bray Wyatt now is the Fiend. He's not relatable at all right now still. Like, yes, everyone's cheering him and loving this, but it's because it's different and we've been wanting different for so long.
Right.
It's not because we think we're not seeing ourselves as the Fiend yet, which that's why Stone Cold got over. Everyone saw themselves as F the boss, I'm going to do what I want type.
And that's also how Mankind ended up going over.
Very much so, like the everyman kind of hero.
Right.
That's not where we are with the Fiend. He's getting a different reaction. Well, he's getting the same reaction, but for a different reason, and I think it's okay.
We're getting the, yay, this is awesome, not, yay, you're just like me.
Right. It's the, this is different, and I don't think anyone wants him to they don't want him to be fun and happy. Like what happened with New Day, that was an organic face turn because they were being entertaining.
Right.
I don't think anyone actually wants the Fiend to be a face. I think they just want it to keep being different and keep being this malevolent character that it is, which is a good thing. That's where you want to be. People are enjoying seeing this character, and eventually they're going to want to see this character get taken down because, well, if we keep pushing it and making it creepy and evil and awful and unsettling, we're going to want that to go away, which is what you want for a heel. But right now it's just different and new and refreshing. So, but back to the previous question, is the Fiend a horror character? Absolutely.
I don't think there's any real doubt in that one.
Yeah, and, we might unfortunately be in the midst of it being undone, to be determined still, but...
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Everything from the first Firefly Funhouse to the Finn Balor match, absolute perfection. And honestly, if we never got anything more, I'll be thankful we got that. I do want more.
Even I would say everything aside from the Hell in a Cell match.
That's fair.
Everything aside from just that. I mean, when he attacked Seth Rollins on the first SmackDown on Fox.
Yeah.
The shot where the smoke is just slightly coming out from the ring and all of a sudden you just kind of see the top part of his head pop up and then sink back down. Perfect. Every time he attacks Seth and Seth is cowering in the corner because he's terrified of what's happening.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Even Seth Rollins burning down the funhouse and Bray's reaction to it. Perfect.
Yeah. That's...
The Hell in a Cell match is what undid everything.
So, my one issue with the burning down of the funhouse is it's more interesting when you're not sure if it's actually a real place.
Well, and that's why it was interesting when Bray goes, "How did you get here?"
Yeah, that's an interesting turn on it.
Because remember, he said that. Seth showed up, and Bray goes, How did you find this place?"
Yeah.
And also, because on SmackDown this previous week, the Funhouse was back, and Bray was sending the message that if we believe hard enough, everything comes back.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they can turn this around. They definitely can. So,
as much as it pains me, he came into the Universal title picture too early.
Definitely.
And he needs to win this match at Crown Jewel and take the belt.
So, think of this for a second. He might actually be doing this entirely correct, even with losing that Hell in a Cell match. Because I think they screwed up with how they ended it, but only just barely. What would have been better is if somehow they had put a trapdoor in the ring, which I wouldn't want them to do because that's actually dangerous. We know from Ultimate Warrior stuff in WCW, but if they somehow could have gotten Bray out of like underneath the pile of stuff without him being seen. Because think about how often in a horror movie in like the middle of like in the middle of Act 2, oh, we got him.
Right.
That's it. He's done. We won forever.
Act 3 starts and, oh no, he's back.
Right. Well, middle of Act 2. That's not how a 3-act structure works, sir.
Whatever.
Yeah, but exactly. Like, oh, we got him. It seems like we're going into the ending. We're happily ever after. Rises back up. Like, out of nowhere. Everyone starts like, oh, now 8 more people are suddenly dead. Oh, God. That wasn't it. We didn't get him. He's much more powerful than we ever thought. I think that's what they were going for looking back on it now. They could have done that. I mean, instead of doing a trap door, just have them stay away from one corner of the ring and have them just rip the thing and climb underneath. Right, or just have it happen right outside the ring, have them go under the ring or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's ways of disappearing someone if you wanted to make him disappear. I think that would have been better than him getting back up and going back after Seth. But thinking about it in that context, I think the fans were too ready to shit on it.
Yeah.
But I think the fans rightfully shit on it because our expectations have been set that WWE is going to screw things up and ruin things.
Yeah.
So they didn't earn our trust to believe that this is going to have a payoff still. We thought that was the payoff and it's all over.
Which is clearly not the case.
Right.
I think they've put too much into this to ruin it already.
The Crown Jewel thing is going to be huge, depending on what happens there, and I'm still scared, but
we'll see.
Yep. All right. Moving on.
All right. So next up, we have the Dark Carnival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I had my ICP fan phase in high school. In high school.
Yeah.
In 1997.
I never had my ICP phase because, I'm sorry, they're dumb.
Well, you're also a decade younger than I am, and that's a completely reasonable look to have on things. But, you know, when you're 17 in high school and, hey, these anti-establishment clowns, that was fine at the time.
Yeah, in 1997.
Right.
So Dark Carnival consisted of Vampiro and ICP.
You're missing one person.
Am I?
Great Muda.
That was after ICP left.
Was it?
Yes.
Okay.
So he also had a third person with him for a short time, but ICP like kind of stopped showing up that often.
That was pretty typical for ICP. So they had recently jumped from WWE to WCW. ICP had. They used to be with the Oddities because they did their whole theme music and everything, and then they jumped over to WCW. Didn't they have the Demon with them for a while?
Yes, that's who it was. It was the
Dale
Demon.
Torborg.
Yeah. So
the Kiss Demon, another failed Eric Bischoff creation, I'll say.
Yeah. It was something. I mean,
Sure were.
They were around for all of maybe 6 months in WCW.
Sounds about right.
And they didn't really do much, but they ended up getting... I wouldn't say they were the reason that Vampiro got pushed to the stars.
Right.
But it definitely helped a little bit. Okay, so Dark Carnival... I'm sorry. It was Vampiro, ICP, the Demon, and Great Muta, but the Muta and Demon left or joined after Raven left because Raven was a part of the Dark Carnival for a short time.
Oh, good Lord.
It was essentially Raven's Flock 2.0.
I'm about to say, if you actually look it up on
7.0.
Wikipedia, it is underneath the Raven's Nest article.
Yeah.
The Deadpool, originally called the Necro Ward, was another stable centered on Raven. It was first put together in August 99 while Raven was WCW and saw him teaming up with Vampiro in the Insane Clown Posse.
Yep.
When Raven quit WCW and went back to ECW, a month after the group's inception, Vampiro and ICP stayed together under the moniker of the Dark Carnival and continued without him. The group has since resurfaced numerous times in ICP's Juggalo Championship Wrestling,
Yeah.
where ICP formed another version of the group, the Deadpool 2000, with the addition of Balls Mahoney and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, it was Vampiro, ICP, Muta, and the Demon. Muta and Demon after
Raven
left.
left.
Good
So-
Lord, what a collection of... Muta, we're both huge, giant Muta fans over the top about Muta, so
Yep.
excluding Muta, what a collection of shit.
Yeah.
No offense, Dale Torborg.
We were talking about Vampiro beforehand, and that dude, in every sense of the word, or every sense of the phrase, happened to be in the right place at the right time with his character.
Yeah, so hang on just 1 second, because I just happened to look up some information about Dale Torborg, because I'm like, before I shit talk someone, let me make sure they're not dead, because he came from that era where someone could be dead.
He's not dead from what I remember.
He is not. He's currently the conditioning coordinator for the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah, after he gave up wrestling, he started doing a lot of coaching for baseball.
Yes, because he's son of former Major League Baseball manager Jeff Torborg.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then.
Nice to have daddies in high places, it seems.
Right.
Okay, so back to fuck this guy. I'm real fickle here.
So, Vampiro started in Mexico. And again, this is going to be more about Vampiro than it is the Dark Carnival.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Because the only reason that the Dark Carnival would, quote, be a horror theme is because of their face paint. And that's not nearly one of the conditions that we have. So,
What, are the Misfits not a horror band?
I mean, I wouldn't consider them a horror band.
No.
So, Vampiro started in...
Is Kiss not a horror band?
Stop.
I mean, Gene Simmons is a horror as far as being a human being goes, but
So
apparently I'm getting politically sassy on this episode.
yeah, calm yourself. Calm yourself.
It's all this caffeine.
We still have a whole nother person to go through. Let me run through this short one quick.
All right, let's kill this.
Vampiro started in Mexico, and the only reason, from what I remember reading, is that he got over in Mexico was because he was a pretty boy. He was this pretty boy who had dreads, and they were dyed blue, and he got over so much because the female fans liked him so much.
He was different in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and really the only things that he could do in the ring at the time were strikes and headbutts.
Yeah, I mean, he's not too far above your... This is going to sound worse than I mean it, but like kind of your garbage indie wrestler of, I'm throwing myself at you.
Yeah, like he
He could do like a tope or something, but...
He very much had a feel of untrained, but had the look.
So, let me put it as brutally as I possibly can. Hulk Hogan was more technically proficient at wrestling than Vampiro was.
Yes.
That's the long and the short of it.
Yep.
There were more technically proficient moves performed by Hulk Hogan on a more regular basis than Vampiro.
Yeah. And again, his look is what ended up getting him pushed to the stars.
Yep.
He had nothing based on merit, like in his actual in-ring work. I mean, like we were talking about earlier, the guy had a program with Sting.
Yep. He had a big feud with Sting.
And nothing came of it because he couldn't work.
Right. Like, they gave him some massive wins over Sting, and it didn't get him over. He didn't do anything with them. And it's not because management wasn't behind him.
Fans weren't behind him.
Yeah. Somehow this guy manages to worm his way into management everywhere he goes. Like, he gets in the ears of the right people. He's basically Russo, but in the ring.
Yeah. Because, I mean, look at with AAA. He ends up as, announcer for AAA? And
yeah, currently he's an announcer.
Announcer with AAA, or is it CMLL?
Ooh.
I believe it's... Well,
Yeah.
hang on.
I unfortunately cannot tell you the difference.
Now I gotta look.
I know one of them is kind of like the Botch Fest, and the other one is the longer running one, I think. Yeah, I honestly do not know the difference. I know they're the two big ones. AAA, okay.
Yeah. He started in CMLL.
Burned a bridge.
Yep. Went back in like 2007, then disappeared and went to AAA.
Yeah, and then AAA was the one that had the agreement with Lucha Underground, must have been?
Correct.
Okay.
And kind of a pseudo agreement with AEW.
Okay.
I mean,
because isn't Kenny their champ now?
Yes, Kenny won the AAA quote heavyweight title.
All right.
He gets into management pretty much everywhere that he goes. I mean, he's got kind of an idea about booking, I guess.
He can book someone super strong, but only for the purpose of him then being able to go over them.
Right. For instance, Lucha Underground, Pentagon Jr.
Yep.
They had a big match where Vampiro ends up being the master that
Pentagon Jr. was serving.
Yep, snapping arms as tributes to his master, only for Vampiro to go over.
Yeah. And there is a huge long-running feud between Conan and Vampiro.
Not anymore.
Oh, they buried the hatchet?
They buried the hatchet when they were in WCW together.
Oh, no.
They were part business partners with Lucha Underground.
Yeah.
With Chavo.
So they're able to work together at times, but they do not like one another.
It was because of Vampiro was supposed to get a telenovela spot in Mexico because he was such a big star down there.
Yep.
And he did not get it because he thinks that Conan ended up burying him because he told them that his command of the Spanish language was not nearly what it should be, and Conan ended up getting the spot.
And Conan became became a star off that as well,
right,
in Mexico.
So, bottom line, Vampiro overall could have been a horror villain, horror-ish, if he did anything.
Right, like there was literally nothing about him other than face paint and
tattoos
being tatted up. Like, he was a goth.
Yeah.
He was a goth kid.
Yep.
And that's really, like, there was no, besides, like, being, quote-unquote, like, he acted kind of, like, creepy and spooky, like, but it was so over-the-top B-movie cheesy.
So did Sting.
Right. Like, there was nothing about it that even hinted at any sort of supernatural. It was more, I'm dark and violent and moody.
Yeah.
So, just a complete
swing and a miss on that one.
Big time. Which,
moving on to probably the
granddaddy of them all.
Yeah. I would say not the entire reason, but pretty much the reason that we have the ability to do a show or a mini-series like this.
Right. The innovator, like, it's going to say, we're here to say innovator as far as this goes, but really kind of
the first
super visible and popular and long-term supernatural gimmick was The Undertaker.
And I'm assuming we're also going to mix Kane in with this by proxy.
Yeah, probably. But, yeah, going back to winter, or actually late fall of 1991, Survivor Series, we have the Dead Man making his appearance as Kane the Undertaker, which we'll drop the Kane like the next appearance.
Yeah.
But we have this guy coming out dressed like, a Wild West era Undertaker, big black trench coat, wearing all black, weird hat, the whole 9 yards. We know what the old Undertaker stuff looks like.
Right. When he first debuted, like you said, kind of Wild West thing, but he had like the pale face paint, almost like a zombie.
Yeah, his face was definitely powdered a bit. Like, he was very pale early on, almost bordering on Sheamus level pale.
Yeah.
Like, it was probably a little like white powder makeup, but also just avoiding being in the sun or anything. And he was very much in the vein of, he was definitely modeled after, I want to say, probably Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th movies, because originally he's just this giant, not really lumbering, well, because he did move very fast at times.
Yeah.
Like, he would do the thing where he gets whipped to the ropes and ducks under a clothesline and bounces, and he's like going real fast and hits a flying clothesline. But more often, he was just this giant, menacing, slow-moving, very methodical pacing, unstoppable giant man.
Yeah, and that lasted probably up until
about 94.
Yeah.
It went. And he would have this thing where if he ever was getting beaten down by someone, Paul Bearer would hold up the urn, he would sit up, start no-selling everything, and again, he would like become this unstoppable juggernaut of inevitability that this guy's going to beat you. And then we started having casket matches and Undertaker disappearing for a while, having weird green smoke pour out of the coffin, his body disappearing from it, him showing up on the Titantron videos, having weird lightning behind him, and eventually facing his own evil twin, which was never really explained.
Ugh.
But very much in the horror vein of an unstoppable monster that is unrelenting, you can't hurt him, and if you do miraculously somehow stop him for a minute, it's literally for a minute, and then it's right back on you.
Yeah. And again, that was up until 94, probably early 95 at the very latest.
Right. That's kind of when the face turn came for the first time with him, started becoming good guy. And soon after that was when Mankind would come in and Paul Bearer would turn on Undertaker. And soon after the split from Paul Bearer is when we would start kind of losing some of that horror gimmickness to it. And we'd start being a little bit more of, this guy's just a big, tough guy.
Yeah. And it would eventually shift back to horror stuff towards the Ministry kind of thing.
Yep, when the Ministry of Darkness would become a thing, and that the Ministry was real. We talked about it with the Brood a couple weeks back. The whole Ministry of Darkness thing was actually relatively short-lived.
Surprisingly short for how much they had going on at that time.
Right. Well, the thing was, it ended up dovetailing into and becoming the corporate ministry.
Yeah.
So that whole thing happened. And after that was when he was out injured for a while. And then he came back as the Biker Taker.
Which was more of his real life.
Yeah, the American Badass. It
right.
just happened to still go by the name Undertaker.
Right.
Let's say. And then we'd transition into away from the American Badass stuff, but still not really supernatural anymore.
Not as supernatural as the first kind of stuff.
Yeah, not as but as the first incarnation. It would just be more pageantry and show for the sake of
right. But the way that they did it, I would say, is very horror-esque, because Undertaker ended up losing in a casket match. like American Badass Undertaker lost in a casket match and then came back as the Dead Man.
Yeah.
So that's when we got the similar style Undertaker to what we know now, where he's got the long trench coat and the old kind of cowboy hat.
Yeah, but I think the split there was that stuff all kind of ends when the ring bell starts.
Yeah,
because then he goes into more of like the MMA shoot fighter style of...
Yeah, then he throws his hands up and immediately boxes somebody down.
Yeah, which totally, like, we're not going to get into their in-ring styles or anything, but the gimmick is much more divorced from the premise once the stuff starts in. And as we've said for the past few weeks, the in-ring needs to kind of match the gimmick in order for it to really be a successfully well done thing.
Right.
So I'd say at that point we're definitely out of the horror supernatural territory at the very least. It's just kind of more pageantry and mind games and the don't forget it's my legacy type thing more than
it's more of a this is who I am kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like don't forget I've been here for X amount of time, and
yeah.
It's like, I'm not some new guy. You're not going to back me down. I'm going to back you down type thing.
Yeah.
It's about to say his entrances are more now I'm bringing my, it's almost like his resume. It's the don't forget who I am, son.
Yeah. It's essentially when you go to a show to see, when Undertaker's on one of those shows and you go there to see him, you're more or less going to see the entrance and the person.
Right.
You're not there to see him put on a 5-star match.
Right. Like, it's no longer, the character aspect of it is kind of gone now, and you're not thinking that, how is anyone ever going to stop this guy? He's not even human. He can stand up out of anything. It's it's this guy. Yeah,
it's the Undertaker.
Yeah, it's Taker. We know he's a badass type.
Right.
It's right. So, yeah, we'll say about 95, 96 is when the supernatural aspect of it really kind of got put on the back burner. Kane coming in definitely tried to play up some horror tropes with like the house burning down and
the family dying in the fire and Kane being disfigured.
Right, but that was less supernatural and more slasher-ish kind of thing. So successful? Yeah. I mean, back in the day it definitely was.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see Mark Calloway having a career as long as he does now if he doesn't become the Undertaker.
Definitely not. I mean, you can look back at
he was okay back when he was in WCW in like
right.
80s.
I was just about to say, well, no, he was only in WCW for about a year. If you go back and look at his WCW work, it was fine, and it's very reminiscent of what he would do once he became the Undertaker. But as the Undertaker, he actually slowed it down even more and made it menacing in the ring, and that's really what helped sell it. Was the nothing I do to this guy really works.
Right.
And it's not like he's even it was the lack of emotion where he wasn't angry at me, he wasn't swiping furiously at me. It was just that this is going to happen and there's nothing I can do to stop this.
Exactly.
And it really tapped into that. He's like almost a force of nature that you can't stop him. It's going to happen and it ain't going to be good for you.
Yep.
That a good supernatural horror thing does play up. So,
kind of what The Fiend was doing up until Hell in a Cell.
Yes. And as I think we've just discussed, there's a lot of room to pull to come through that okay.
Right.
I think the internet jumped on it because it wasn't that it was even the wrong thing to do. It was that we didn't trust the company to do it.
Right.
So,
whereas, to be honest, I don't think we ever hit that point with The Undertaker.
Well, we also trusted the company back then.
True. And Undertaker's also one of those guys who, if it wasn't going to be right, I don't think he would have done it.
I don't know about that necessarily. He has a lot of trust in the company, but
he's also got a lot of weight to throw around in the company as well. I mean,
very, very true.
He's one of those guys that I feel like if anybody's going to walk up to Vince and say, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do this, and Vince be like, sure.
Right.
It would be him.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, aside from Triple H.
Yeah, he's definitely earned his place to be like, we're going to do what's right for the company, which reminds me of the Kiss My Ass thing with JR.
Right.
Which was really good. That was a great heel turn by Taker, looking back on that. But that's a whole different thing. Anyways, anything else to add on the whole horror thing? Anything we need to do to wrap this whole thing up?
I don't think so. I don't know how we're going to top this coming up, but...
Yeah, we'll figure out a way. Next week will be a disappointment for sure. But
absolutely.
Yeah, so, tune out next week.
Don't say that.
Oh, all right. Tune in next week. But, yeah, I think this has been really fun, kind of taking a deeper dive into the characters as opposed to just some single matches.
Yeah.
And I guess overall, I think there's still definitely room for horror, even supernatural horror-based characters in wrestling. They can definitely work. They just need to be well thought out. They need to be more than surface dressing. Like, they need to take the gimmick into their performance in the ring.
Yes.
I think that's going to be the biggest through thread for the super successful ones that we covered is if they live it in the ring, it's got a chance. It's
Absolutely.
Not 100%, but...
Absolutely.
All right. On that note, more history.